Welcome back, everybody, to week 2 of our special Vox Advent evening prayer little video series. We have a whole lot to cover, so I'm going to dive right into it right away. My goal today is to answer 2 questions. My questions are going to be this. Number 1 was Jesus born in a barn? Was Jesus born in a barn, right? Question 2 is, if Jesus was born in a barn or some other not great place for a baby, why didn't the shepherds offer to take them to their house instead? Like, if they really were in an overcrowded area or in a barn or anything like that, why didn't the shepherds, once they arrived, because a literal angel told them that this was God, why didn't they bring Jesus to their home instead? The reason these are really good questions is because one of the pillars of Jewish society at this time is the idea of hospitality. Anthropologists talk about, if you want to know what's important to a society, look at how the society came to be and what that society wanted when the society was first formed. And so when we look at the story of the Gospels and the story of how Israel got their land, they got their land out of a gift from God and God's graciousness. And so hospitality, knowing that they are strangers on God's land, becomes a huge pillar of their society. Hospitality is huge for them. And in order to understand this best, we're going to look at what a house in Bethlehem or many other rural communities would have looked like. So this is going to be a diagram real quick. Hopefully you guys find this interesting. I always do. The houses were pretty cookie cutter in a way because they're trying to maximize their very minimal amount of resources, like we talked about last week. If you wanted a house built, you'd call up Joseph. Joseph knew how to build stuff with very minimal means. Also, that means that they're going to look very similar because it's all pretty similar construction. So the houses would be very square in shape. Right? There's your whole house. And then you'd have a couple stairs leading up to it, and then you have your door, right? Bam, there's your house in Bethlehem, your average Bethlehem house. And really, this would break down into 3 major sections. So we're going to break those down today. The first section would literally be the roof. This roof would also be called the house of the prophets, or the room for the prophets, or the prophet's room. It can get translated a lot of ways. The idea of the roof is that it was a flat surface. There would be kind of a trap door in your house that you could open up and take a ladder up to the literal roof, giving you a little bit more space. But this is where, if you had a guest and the weather allowed, you put them up on the roof because of the climate. And so if a foreigner, or if someone was coming through your land, like in Bethlehem, because of the census, they would stay on the roof. Because you built your roof with the idea of hospitality in mind, it is your guest room, weather permitting. The rest of the house is going to be a vast majority, and we're going to do another diagram. I hope you guys like diagrams because we're diving into it. I'm going to draw it up here. I hope it's going to be okay with everyone. So this is kind of like a bird's eye view of that other part of the house. So if you walked in the house, let's say here's the door, you'd be met almost immediately with a wall. On the wall, there would be stairs going up, which would lead to the upper part of the house, and there would be stairs going down, which would take you to a basement. On the upstairs, the house would be divided into thirds, about like that. This first part would be like your dining or entertaining room. So once again, hospitality in mind, that's kind of the first thing you're met with when you come into the living quarters. So this is where, if Jesus was in a house teaching, he would be sitting in the dining room teaching, and there would be kind of a natural stage for him to talk down and out to. And it's also why in the story of the man who was lowered in through the roof, people were able to lower him through the roof, also lowering him through the guest room. Another story for another time. So you'd have the dining room here. Up here is where all your kiddos would be. Kids need their own space. Normally this would be kind of like a little slope or maybe another step up, but it would be kind of just a big open room, no real walls. So you'd have your dining room, you'd have your kids' room, and then up here, Mom and Dad, good news, is your master bedroom. Hooray! And this would also be, if you had any elders, grandparents, you would have them live with you in this part of the house. Like I said, this would all be very open air. These lines are only here kind of for dramatic effect. There wouldn't actually typically be walls inside the house in that way. So this would be the main area of your house. If you went downstairs, you would find kind of the basement of the house. And the basement is really used for three things. The first thing you might have noticed is there's no kitchen up here. And people probably want to eat. In the basement would be the kitchen. It also would be kind of general overstow for like storage. Just like our basements today, if you have too much stuff, or like if you have something that isn't for the weather outside or anything like that, you'd store it in the basement. But then most importantly, other than the kitchen, it's also where you would put your animals. You'd put your animals down here because very few people would actually have a barn, because that's going to require a whole other chunk of resources to build onto your property, of which you probably don't have a lot of anyway. And like we talked about last week, if you want to chop down a tree to build something with the lumber, that means you're no longer getting the product that that tree would give. And so the idea of a barn isn't really something that they would have. Now maybe they would have like a cave that's often depicted, and you build a small fence in front of it and put your animals in there. And that's possible, but that would still be something that like a rich person could afford, as opposed to the normal person would put their animals at night into the bottom of their house, and this would be their chickens, their lambs, and their goats. It wouldn't be like cows or large livestock. So the question is, was Jesus born in a barn or a basement or the roof, or what exactly is going on? And to look even further, we're going to do some Greek words here. I know we're doing a lot of information really quick, but bear with me. The first word that we're going to look at is this. It's the Phandotion. I'm going to see if I can spell it right. I probably can't. This is a word that literally means, like inn is how it's most often translated, or guest house or resting place. The Phandotion. And this word appears once in the Gospel of Luke. However, it's not in the Gospel, or in the narrative story, the nativity story, my apologies. Instead, we find this used only in Luke chapter 10, where the Samaritan man takes the wounded Israelite man into an inn or a resting place. Instead, what we see most often in the nativity story is the word Kataluma, which is the literal translation of the basement. And so your basement is your Kataluma. Now the Kataluma is a very sacred, special place. Yes, it's your kitchen, it's your storage, and it's for your animals, but this is a gift given to homes by God, according to the Mishnah. You see, in the Kataluma, things cannot be made ritually unclean. And this is very important to someone who values hospitality. You want your house to be clean. So why is your kitchen in the Kataluma? Because you're handling, if you're cooking meat, an uncooked animal carcass. Touching that, regardless of if it's a clean or unclean animal, makes you ritually unclean. But if you prepare it in the Kataluma, your house remains clean. You remain clean because you did it in a special space set aside for you by God in your household. It's also where any type of bodily fluids would need to be cleaned up. You also notice there's no bathroom. If you have a baby, there's no changing station in your house. Bad news. So if babies do what babies do and you have to change a diaper, you would have to take it to the Kataluma to discard of the feces, because otherwise you would be made unclean. Now this is very important, because if you're like me, you also watched a horrific tape in junior high about women giving birth. And in the birthing process, there are body fluids involved. And so, where would Mary have given birth? In the place that is set aside for women to give birth in, the Kataluma. So we can answer this question. Was Jesus born in a barn? No. Now, maybe the idea of he was born in a cave might hold up. But the issue is, if he was born in a cave, the shepherds who were bound by hospitality would have taken Mary to their basement or Kataluma, where she could have been able to actually take care of Jesus better. But if she was already in the Kataluma, she is already in a place where she is still clean ritually, because she's in that special place. So why didn't the shepherds take Mary? Because Mary, if she left the Kataluma, is unclean. And so ultimately, everything that is going on is Luke describing really pretty generic childbirth, in the first century Judaism. So why is Luke recording it? That's always the question of why. What Luke is trying to show us is the immediate paradox that is the birth of Christ. It is the most usual birth. It is a child being born in the place that a child is supposed to be born, in the Kataluma. Luke is recording this. At the same time, it's the most unusual birth because angels are showing up. There's different stars in the sky. People are coming and worshiping this baby in the Kataluma. So Luke is trying to prep us for right away the story of Christ will be one filled with paradox because he is 100% man, born in the Kataluma as every other man would have been, but also he is 100% God of shepherds and angels showing up. So I hope this helps. These were always two questions I had in the Nativity. We're getting ready, if you're on the Zoom call, to begin some discussion about this. If you have any questions, please let me know, and we'll talk there. Until next week, we will see you then.